When I was designing the church sign, one of the key elements I wanted to include was a dropped Gothic arch on the top. I knew from the beginning that building the 1 3/4 inch thick, 3-inch wide curved section of frame in this area was going to be a challenge. The simplest method would be to cut it out of a solid or laminated block of wood. However, this is not structurally strong and aesthetically it's suboptimal as the grain lines do not follow the curve of the piece, and you end up with cathedral patterns on the face. The two other options involve bending the wood, which requires a custom bending form, so I set about creating one. In Fusion 360, I projected the drop Gothic curve I had created for the sign, exaggerating it slightly to account for springback inherent to bending wood. I designed recesses for clamps and holes to secure it to the bending table. I then took the design to Narwhal Labs at TotalBoat in Bristol, Rhode Island, where Jeff obligingly cleaned up my amateurish cam. Using the Avid CNC and some scrap Baltic birch plywood, we cut out enough pieces to make two forms. Bent glue lamination involves cutting thin strips of wood that are flexible on their own, spreading a generous layer of glue between the layers, then bending them around to form. Once the glue dries, the piece will retain that shape. One downside is that the laminations are often visible in the finished piece. With steam bending, you place a solid part in a sealed steam box for several hours, which softens the lignin that holds the wood fibers together and makes it remarkably pliable. While it is still hot, you bend it around the form. Once it cools down, it will retain that shape. With this technique, the grain lines follow the bend nicely. I ended up going with steam bending, something I had exactly zero experience with. I used the steam bending kit from Rockler. I got the strap clamp, block and tackle, and bench pins from Lee Valley, and built the bending table as laid out in the instruction booklet that is available on their website. This was my first try at steam bending, and it did not go particularly smoothly. I live streamed my first few tries on Instagram, exposing my ignorance to the world. I had trouble getting the piece hot enough, even with more than 4 hours in the steam box, and the forces required to bend this thick white oak around the curve were beyond what I could supply manually, even with the block and tackle setup. At one point, I thought I was being sabotaged by kiln-dried wood, so I milled up some white oak that I had writhed myself. Unfortunately, I met with the same mediocre results. After my 4th or 5th abject failure, I was pretty close to calling it quits. There's a strange feeling that 1 3/4 inch thick white oak does not want to be bent. I may end up having to go with bent lamination. Let's try anyway. Fortunately, I persisted. In my first attempt, I barely got any bend at all. I was ultimately able to bend the green piece I milled, but it took 4 or 5 hours in the box, several attempts, and had major compression failure due to a knot on the inner curve. In addition, you can see deep staining caused by the spring steel reacting with the tannins in the wood. The only failure with this last test piece was because the piece was not centered vertically in the clamp jaws, which bowed the wood significantly. I incorporated a trick I learned from Instagram to prevent the staining, simply wrap the spring steel with shipping tape. In the Badlands, between the Fire Nation and the Water Tribe, deep in the Rift Valley of Lee, shadowed by the Rock of Lur, lives an elite group of men and women. Drawing from the strengths of their neighbors, they combine powers in ways never before seen. They are the Steam Benders. I refined my process to the point where I could confidently make repeatable bends requiring no pre-soaking of the stock. First, I added insulation to the steam box, which makes for more consistent temperatures inside. The steam generator and box design are from Rockler. I got a cheap Bluetooth connected meat thermometer with 2 probes to more closely monitor the heating process. I attached a piece of string to the workpiece so I could push it deep inside the box and thus closer to the steam input, but still be able to retrieve it without severely burning myself. A hole drilled in the waste end allows me to place one of the thermometer probes to monitor the core temperature of the piece. The form is held on the table with pins from Lee Valley. The strap clamp, also from Lee Valley, allows for a controlled bend, preventing the outer curve from stretching, which would lead to failure. The lever arm helps with mechanical advantage. Here you can see the tape on the strap that prevents the staining. My biggest eureka moment was adding a 1-ton worm gear winch from Harbor Freight to take advantage of the lever arm. I lag bolted this directly to the table and attached the cable to the eye bolt that came with the Lee Valley block and tackle kit. I started the steam generator, making sure to keep it filled with water. Once the box reached 212 degrees, I put the piece in, using welding gloves to keep from burning myself. Like that. I then switched over to monitoring the core temperature probe, which passed the 200-degree mark after about 30 minutes. After 2 hours or so, I pulled the piece out with my string and quickly, but not frantically, got the piece in the clamp. I was careful to center the clamp jaws on the width of the workpiece, preventing the bowing seen on my last test bend. The winch worked like a dream, with a thick piece bending like butter. To prevent cracking, I threw a towel over the piece for a few hours to gradually bring it down to temperature. After several hours, I removed the strap clamp. The tape prevented nearly all of the oxidation that I had seen on the test pieces. I left both halves of the arch clamped to the form for over a week, and then removed them and did a test fit. There was remarkably little spring back. I will go over the post-processing of this part in the next video.